trying to figure out whether Joe Biden is aware that he's still president of the United States, where he's at any 1 second. It is. The presidency has become a Where's Waldo game. Is he going to show up here? Is he going to show up there? Has anybody seen him? Could anybody see him? Would you recognize him if you saw him? What were those pictures of him the other day? And the hair is just kind of everywhere. And it's like, oh, this is just not a good look. And of course, he's not at the unveiling of Notre Dame, but he's in Africa. And while he's in Africa, he's falling asleep. We have stated for a long time, whether you're seeing him or you're not seeing him, he clearly isn't running the country. That much we know. There's just no possibility of this. He is vacant. I should say he's vacant. I mean, maybe his mind is. But the White House, the presidency, has a vacancy. Are we going to discuss this as a nation or not? Tony Katz, that is me. Tony Katz Today is the name of the show. Ed Morrissey joins me right now from hotair.com. He is the capo de tutti capo over there at hotair.com. Good man does good things. You have a piece about this, which you refer to as total vacuum. Dems admit Sede Vacante in Oval Office. I just love Sede Vacante. So I'm not the only person who has been noticing this. Certainly people engaged with this video right now or listening to the radio shows. They are engaged with this. They know that he's not there. So what makes you think that the Democrats have finally admitted this?
Well, the phrase total vacuum is actually a quote from an unnamed Democrat in the White House. Now, that was in reference to Joe Biden's party leadership, but it's very clear that this is in reference to Joe Biden's overall leadership, Tony. And look, I don't think anybody that's been watching this unfold for the last several months, at least since the June 27th debate, can dispute it. I mean, Joe Biden has been a non-entity. He isn't showing up. He's literally not there. You mentioned the reopening of Notre Dame. Donald Trump went there and was greeted by Emmanuel Macron. And if you don't know diplomatic protocol, you don't understand how significant that was. Donald Trump is not president. And so diplomatic protocol would, even though he's president-elect, diplomatic protocol would normally have a lower-level minister greet somebody who's not the president. Usually the presidents greet presidents, et cetera, that sort of thing. Heads of state greet heads of state, right. Heads of government greet heads of government. There's a protocol for this type of thing. And if Joe Biden had actually gone, Macron would not have greeted Trump. So the fact that he's getting greeted by heads of state and heads of government on these trips is an indication that even foreign leaders are tacitly recognizing that this is basically the American president at the moment. And it's not Joe Biden. Joe Biden just simply isn't there. Sede Vacante, by the way, for those who are unfamiliar with the term, it's a Latin term that means the seat is vacant or vacant seat. And this is a term that's used at the Vatican when popes die or, as Benedict XVI did, retire all of a sudden, and you have to call another conclave. Now, the difference between the two is that the Vatican anticipates this. That's actual status. Sede Vacante is an actual status that requires the cardinals to return to Rome so that they can elect the new pope. And for the few weeks that takes, usually no longer than 3 or 4, certainly I think it was 3.5 in 2013. I was there covering it for most of that period of time. They have a caretaker government. It's very well laid out. The cardinals form a commission. They handle the affairs of state at the Vatican and basically act in the name of the upcoming pope until that pope is elected.
Until you see the white smoke and new things are starting.
White smoke, the bells are ringing in the square, all the fun stuff, right? In America, we have a 10-week plus transition that's really kind of problematic, even when you have a lame duck president who's actually engaged in the process. We don't actually have that this time. And it's not just Joe Biden. Where's Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris is the sitting vice president. She's nowhere to be found either. And think about this, Tony. She wants to make an argument, or at least the rumors are that she wants to make an argument about running for president again in 2028, or possibly governor of California in 2026. You're shaking your head. I'm just saying,
it's not going to happen.
I don't think it'll happen either.
The president part isn't going to happen. The governor part could totally happen.
Possibly, but she is not making a case for that. If she really wanted to make a case for that, she'd be in Washington, D.C. right now. She'd be handling all of these ceremonial and substantive duties that Joe Biden is clearly not able to do. And right now, I mean, it looks like Jill Biden's the only one that's on the job.
Talking to Ed Morrissey of hotair.com, allow me to at least answer part of that when it comes to Kamala Harris. Performing the duty has already been done. She is a woman with a certain skin color, and that to the Democratic Party is performing the duties. And if you're insulted by that, you haven't been watching how she got the nomination.
Biden said it. That was Joe Biden's qualifications. I'm going to appoint a black woman to this to be my running mate.
And I have her campaign staff saying the reason we didn't have an open primary is that black women in America would have been upset if it wasn't Kamala Harris. So you live by the identity politics, you die by the identity politics, but you also believe that the identity politics is all you need to do to get past and get through. But the Democrats admitting this as you're discussing it, I think plays into a larger scale conversation, Ed, about how fractured and broken this party is. Usually you hear Democrats talking about Republicans in disarray, the Republicans in chaos. When they got rid of Kevin McCarthy, which I always thought was the wrong decision based on what I've seen Mike Johnson do, and I'm not opposed to Speaker Johnson. I'm not angry with him in any way. It's the same things. It's almost pound for pound the same exact things. But it was always about Republicans in chaos, and chaos this and chaos that, and this one's in chaos, and your mother's in chaos, and it was all chaos. The Democratic Party is broken on the subject of the border, on the subject of Israel, when it comes to the economy, where they still want to tell you everything's fine. If you don't understand it, you're just too dumb to get it. And certainly broken on the idea of what the heck happened in this election. This election is we didn't run a likable candidate. No, this election is because the nation is sexist and bigoted. They are fractured beyond fractured. Is my thesis accurate, or am I missing it?
I don't know that it's accurate, Tony. I'll disagree with you. This is an unusual moment for us. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't think that the Democrats are in disarray. I think they're just extremists. And they are finding out that when you become extremist, you don't win elections. And they are not willing so far to moderate their positions on these things because they are enthralled to the extremist wing of their party. The progressives have control of the party, and the progressives are not going to let go of that control. And this is not the populist progressives. This is the academia-based progressives. This is the critical race theory / DEI wing of the party that you were talking about. This is the racial determinist wing of the party. And they are in control, and they are not going to let that control go. And they are similar to other Marxists, which is basically saying our failures are a result of us not being hard enough, of not being true enough to our ideals. And so the answer to that for Marxists is always to double down on the Marxism, because clearly they haven't transformed humanity to the new Marxist man, or the new Marxist person, I guess you would say in these days and ages. And I think that's really what the problem with the Democrat Party is, and you don't have enough Democrats that are willing to acknowledge that.
Well, so your argument is certainly an interesting one, and I could see how people would go, that's absolutely true. Let me say that I don't disagree with the basics, that this is a party that is too extreme, that the extremism is the standard. As I've argued with the Secret Service, I don't believe that there was some conspiracy to allow a shooter in to go after Donald Trump. I believe that progressivism is the conspiracy that has ignorant people in bad spots teaching bad things, not focusing on the right things, and that allows for bad things to happen. That's how it works. The conspiracy is indeed the progressivism itself. I think I'm cribbing Ayn Rand almost at that stage of the game. Your point is really well taken, except there are people like Henry Cuellar, who's going to consider himself a Democrat, saying we have to do something about the border. You've got Fetterman. John Fetterman is the voice of freaking reason, Ed. It's telling us if you're celebrating this murderer of a healthcare CEO, you're a disgusting freak. There is division even amongst the extremists. So your argument is that they've learned that they can't win elections, but they have to win elections. So if the doubling down is the thing, which I don't necessarily disagree with, even though I'm pointing out these pockets of people and of groups where the dissension is, how does one double down on it in their world?
Well, first off, I think you deny the reality that the country is actually a center-right country, and that you have to actually address the concerns of people outside of the academia bubble and the bubble of the governing elite, the elite clique that is running the schools. And I think this all begins in the schools, right? The whole project begins in the schools. But you're right. I mean, there's certainly voices in the Democrat Party that are saying we're too extreme. We're moving in the wrong direction. We're ignoring the actual issues that people care about. It was very clear in this election. Doesn't mean that they're moving the party, though. It just means that they're on the fringes of an extreme party. And Fetterman, I agree with you. I am so pleasantly surprised at John Fetterman's integrity, not on his policy positions. He and I are going to disagree on policy positions all day long. I mean, he is a guy who's at least center left on policy, and I just don't agree with him on that stuff. But he's got integrity. And, there's that line in Full Metal Jacket where Arlene Ermy is screaming into Matthew Modine's face. And he says, and he makes him the leader of that group, that platoon, and saying, Joker is ignorant and stupid, but he's got guts, and guts is enough. And I mean, right. I don't think Fetterman is ignorant or stupid. I just disagree with him on policy. But he's got integrity, and integrity is enough. And there are other Democrat voices that are going to make these arguments, but they're not in control. They're not in charge. The people who are in control of that party are extremists. And until you have enough Democrats that are willing to remove those people from the positions of power within the party, it's going to continue to be an extreme party, and they're going to continue to lose elections. As
you just explained, you can't. Talking to Ed Morrissey of hotair.com, it doesn't exist. And as I'm listening to you, I am saying to myself, I've had this argument before. I've made this argument before, but I didn't make it about the party. I made it about MSNBC. That MSNBC,
it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. You've made the point, and that's absolutely true. MSNBC knows they don't have ratings. MSNBC knows they've gone down a terrible path. And the answer is they can't stop going down the path because this is who they are. To go down the path would be to blow up their own personal brand. They can't admit to that, so they keep getting nuttier and more awful and more despicable and more terrible. And if we take that, which is something I've discussed on air, and we apply it to as you're discussing it with the Democratic Party, the answer is they're going to triple down on you're a racist, you're a bigot, America is racist, America is bigoted, more calls for a lone wolf to take out President-elect and then President Trump, more calls for saying, hey, it's good that CEOs are killed in the middle of the street. This is who they are?
This is who they are. This is who they are. This is who they have been, right? I mean, to some extent, the masks are off, which is a little ironic after COVID, right?
Yeah.
But this is who they are. And your point about MSNBC, I mean, these guys are about to financially crash. Comcast is cutting them loose, along with other cable channels. It's not just MSNBC, but Comcast is cutting them loose, and nobody's going to want to put money into this organization. I sat with Phil Griffin several years ago. I was in Jerusalem at a political conference. I sat with Phil Griffin and the editor-in-chief of Haaretz, and we were talking about curating an audience, curating a community. And Phil Griffin at the time was president of MSNBC, and he said that they deliberately wanted to curate a progressive community because they felt that they could create that community and have a built-in loyal audience by doing that, rather than going the straight down the middle news approach. And I think to a certain extent he's correct, but it's limiting. right? And I think even if Phil Griffin was in charge today, it wouldn't be as nutty as it is right now, because I think Phil Griffin at least had an eyeball on reality, whereas Rashida Jones, who is the current president of MSNBC, not the same
not
woman
the
who's the actor, not the actor, who's the actor is Quincy Jones's daughter.
Right.
And she's actually terrific on screen, by the way. Just throw that in there for the other Rashida Jones. But Rashida Jones has doubled down on that, has become more extreme. She's even got more blinkers on than Phil Griffin did. And I think if Phil Griffin was in charge of MSNBC at this moment, it would still be progressive, but I think he would have wanted to do some reality checks, because I think he was smart enough to see the broader picture. I don't think anybody at MSNBC is looking at the broader picture. They all went thundering down the everybody but us are Nazis, and you can't possibly be for anybody else but us.
When it comes to the network, I see them continuing down a bad path with no way out, because they can't. They'll just have to be fired. The network will have to change. The problem with this argument with the political party is that political parties have to win or they don't exist. So as an organism, change has to come. The organism cannot survive. The individual saying that there's an opportunity for their brand over here, even if they don't have this thing, they can continue to do it. But if the party doesn't survive, the apparatus doesn't survive, they cannot win, they cannot have power, they cannot have opportunities. So maybe it is the same thing, that enough Democrats can win in their little pockets, places, and areas. They can keep their own personal brand going, finger wag like Republicans used to do with Democrats for decades, and nothing comes of it. But I do question highly if Democrats can continue down this road, because without winning, you don't have the thing that you need, which is power to move about, the ideology to be able to further concentrate power.
Well, I think what you're seeing right now is, first off, the American two-party system is basically coalition shepherding, right? We just do it before elections. Parliamentary systems do it after elections, especially in places like Israel. Canada and the UK to some extent too, but multi-party systems where you have an election, then you sort out what the coalition is going to be if you don't have a majority. We do our coalition shuffling prior to elections. And I think what you're going to see is some coalitions are going to move away from the Democrat Party and either become independent or land generally within the tent, as uncomfortable as that may be, with the GOP, especially when it comes to rural voters, workers. I think you're going to see Republicans make a big play for private sector unionization, not so much public sector unionization.
There's a difference.
There's a huge difference there. And I think that Republicans are going to start moving down that road to lock in some of these coalitions that had been part of the Democrat Party for decades. And they're going to peel these things off, because as these coalitions realize that racial determinism is really what the core now of the Democrat Party, these coalitions are not going to have any stake in leadership or in the agenda that the Democrat Party is going to advance. And that's the problem, I think, that Democrats are going to face. And they will still win elections on the coasts, even with that, right?
And
but that's going to be it.
Able to enjoy their fiefdoms. I'm up against it. I'm only up against time. Ed Morrissey. That's Ed Morrissey of hotair.com. You'll be back. We will discuss this more. Always appreciate you, Ed Morrissey. Find everything at TonyKatz.com. This is Tony Katz Today.